Hey friends, welcome to Above the Fold podcast. I'm your host, Jess Servion. We're going to be talking about everything in your customer's journey. You're going to learn things about customer experience, brand experience, and marketing secrets that help you drive your brand success. So stay tuned, buckle up, and let's get into the episode.
Welcome back to another episode. This week, I am in New York City, and I am joined by my friend Ben Segal, who's going to tell you all about himself. Ben, tell the peeps.
Awesome. Yeah, pumped to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I've been a fan of you for a long time, so pumped to be here today, and can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, dog. Well, I really appreciate you coming. You have a really extensive customer experience journey, and I really want to get into it. Tell me about your background.
Yeah, so I come at this, and I know we have this in common a bit, but D2C, e-commerce, CX, not my home originally.
Yeah.
I wanted to work in sports. So I worked for a decade or more in sports entertainment. I worked for the Yankees, the Mets, the Patriots, the Bruins,
shit.
MSG, Barclays Center.
Okay, who is he?
I know. We could dive in anywhere you want. Then
Yeah.
I managed the Bronx Zoo for a while. So here in New York, I was there for 2.5 years, overseeing admissions and guest relations. That was a staff of almost 200 people. And so that was my world, understanding a venue, hospitality, taking people sort of into your home and looking at it that way and making sure they have great experiences while they're there for the event.
Yeah.
Transferring that to Freshly was my first time dipping my toes into the CX world.
Yeah.
So Freshly 2015, 2016, CX team of 12,
Yeah.
all here in New York on 23rd and Park. Came in as a supervisor of this little contact center. And over a 5-year run, that grew to almost 500 people with BPOs all over the world. Wore every hat you could wear in the CX, industry. Put all the tech stack in place. Wound up working with product, engineering, marketing, and like that really was how I got my toes in the water in CX. Wound up being head of CX at Pair Eyewear, and then again at Thesis, and now doing some consulting to be with multiple brands at one time rather than just one. So we can dive into all that. But
dude,
yeah, it's a lot.
I mean, I think it's such an interesting journey, though.
Sure.
We do have a similar journey
Yeah.
because I was in B2B,
Yeah.
CX, and like product marketing, right? Before ever joining Feastables. Feastables was my first e-com company.
Wow.
Nobody would give me a chance. Like so many people kept saying no every time I would apply for like a D2C role. And I really just like wanted to be an e-com. Like I wanted to try on e-com because I've done so much SaaS prior. And I'm getting to my point because I have this very major question to ask you, but like, I think what was interesting about going from B2B to D2C was like, oh shit, like I'm not gonna really like understand this, like am I even gonna be good at this? And I just literally had to figure it the fuck out, right? Like I didn't know necessarily about like subscriptions and e-com and like those things, but you learn it. You definitely learn it. You pick it up. And I think if you come from that hospitality background, because even prior to B2B, I like worked in the travel industry. And I think if you come from like that very like customer service, hospitality background, you just kind of figure it the fuck out.
Yeah.
But what I'm curious about, and this is what I meant, like I was getting to my landing this plane.
Yes.
What was the catalyst for you leaving sports to go to Freshly? Like, why did you apply for that role?
That is a great question, and happy to tee it up. So it sounded to me when you were talking about that you had like wanted to go to D2C e-commerce, or that was something you were aware of and was looking for. I wasn't even aware of it, right? So I didn't even know it. The term CX was new to me. I hadn't even thought of such a thing. So working in sports entertainment takes me from Yankees, Mets, Patriots, Bruins, all that. But at the end was at the Bronx Zoo for 2.5 years. And what wound up frustrating me was when you work at these big brands that have been there for so long, change is difficult and takes a long time. And so, I'm new, young, fresh out of college, sport management degree, think I'm going to go change the world, maybe be the GM of the Yankees or who knows. I would see a problem and want to come up with the solution and implement it right away.
Yeah.
So for example, at the zoo, there was one where you had to pay for parking before you pulled into the lot. Imagine on a very busy Saturday, I don't know if you know the Bronx well, but it's right off the Bronx River Parkway. So that line can back up very quickly. So it was always a struggle on busy weekends of how to get these cars in. And so we started talking about pay on exit. Like I'm sure you've done it a million malls where you just pull in and then figure out the payment, and then the line is on the way out, right? To try to like get to the pay station, figure your car out. So we had this big meeting at the zoo, and we talked about pay on exit and how we would implement such a thing. And we talked about it being 5 years away. that we'd have to, first determine like who would the vendor be, when we start construction, how do we plan this? And I was like, why can't we do it for this year? We can't figure out a way to get it done.
Nobody was fast enough.
They just don't do it, right? They've been around for 120 years, right? They take time. They have city money. There's all these reasons why they go slow. But why I go to Freshly is because I was thinking there's got to be faster things, right?
Yeah.
Startups are a thing.
Yeah.
So I literally start looking up like startups, customer experience, NYC jobs.
But was it experience then, or was it service then?
In looking at the jobs, I was seeing CX.
Okay.
That was new to me, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but I was looking customer service for sure, but I was seeing jobs for CX. It was new. Assumed that would be transferable. And so just started looking up startups in New York, and I found Freshly. Never heard of it. It was one of the first ones I applied to.
Yeah.
And the whole thrill of it for me was that the CEO was going to be right there. It's a small company. We were less than 100 people, all in one office space here in New York. And I thought, if we want to make a change, we can do that quickly and move fast.
Yeah.
And so I was leaving sports entertainment to go to a startup world because I wanted to affect change quicker.
Yeah.
Short story there.
Yeah, that's so interesting that like you went from this like very structured, right, to startups. Because like I think I have like a very similar like pathway in that too, but it wasn't. I didn't necessarily know startups were going to be so quick, which seems really weird because like startups are like really fucking quick. Like it's just like we move at the like speed of fucking light. You know, I actually wanted to go to startups from like my travel industry career because I was like doing all this like corporate travel and there was like these levels and a hierarchy and all this stuff, and I was like, I want to try on like startups and like really just kind of be cool to get the offices with the snacks. Yeah. Because at the time I was living in San Francisco. Right. So I'm from like the startup mecca of tech. Okay. And you would hear about the Google offices or the Facebooks and so you would always want that, you know? That's really like why I went to it. And then customer experience, like before I went into startups and doing CX, like in this B2B world, I was actually in customer success and account management. And then went over to startups, was doing like travel operation. I was like an operation manager, like all these things, right? And then in that pathway, figured out what CX was. But what's funny is like so Feastables was actually my 5th startup. Wow. So I had been at 4 startups at that point, right? And then moved to Chicago, worked at Feastables or whatever. But the job posting was customer service. It was customer service leader. And I remember them reaching out to me and being like, the fuck? Yeah. Like my entire profile says customer experience. Yeah. And I was like, no, we ain't calling it this. Yeah. We're calling it customer experience, blah, blah, blah. And I remember having to like not sell, but like in the conversation, like sell my like old CEO, like about like, no, customer experience is this, and this is my philosophy about it, and it's brand experience and all these things, right? And really like not saying it's like customer service, right? And then like essentially like sold that fucking dream and built that dream at like Feastables and like have continued to do it. But again, landing this plane, there's a reason for me telling you all these things. What I would like to know is you going from sports management, right, and this like entertainment, hospitality type of the stuff, to Freshly looking for these customer experience roles and like newly understanding customer experience. What was your philosophy on customer experience at that time, and then how is that actually transitioned? Sure. So, want to be clear on the time that I worked in sports entertainment. My foot in the door to all that was a fan greeter in the parking lots at Shea Stadium. Yeah. So like my first job in sports was hospitality, right? Yeah. It was guest experience is actually what they called the department. Okay. Interesting start for me. Citi Field was being built. Shea Stadium was being knocked down. Where Citi Field was being built was the parking lot of Shea Stadium. Yeah. And so they needed to hire these sort of fan greeters to be out in the parking lot because the experience out there really sucked. You were going to have to park like maybe a mile away, take a yellow school bus to a drop-off point, which would still be a quarter-mile walk, and then down some stairs. Like imagine if you're older, handicapped, wheelchair, any of these things, like experience was about to suck, and they didn't have an option because like the parking lot is now a construction zone. So all the work that I did in sports was in some sort of customer guest experience.
And so I was always looking at things through that lens, no matter where I was, and always assuming that, I viewed these things as like my home. And I would think about how would I want to greet people into my home. I want to make sure they feel comfortable. I want to make sure they're taken care of, make sure they get food, make sure they get drink, make sure that they feel like they want to come back. And so that applied to all the jobs that I had in sports entertainment, regardless of where I was. So coming into Freshly, D2C, e-commerce, startup world, that was my philosophy from day one. I knew nothing about ticketing systems or, any of this stuff. That was all new to me, like you said. But I thought, we're dealing with customers. These are real people. And there's no difference between, welcoming them into my venue versus having an interaction with them on a call, chat, email, wherever it is. We wound up being the face of the brand, right? Because there was no physical presence to a Freshly or a Pair Eyewear. And so I always viewed myself sort of in that same way of, this is the experience, right? This is how they're going to understand our brand, feel our brand, have an impression of our brand. And so I've always thought of it as welcoming someone into a home.
Yeah.
And that on the other side of that call, chat, email, SMS, Apple Business Message, whatever, that is a real life human. They are genuinely, at our will at this point to decide like how are they going to feel about the brand. And it was on us to make sure that those were great experiences. And I saw it the same as when I welcome people into my venue.
Yeah. I think that's the differentiator. When you think about customer service versus customer experience, right? And I actually do think a lot of people find themselves in this like role, and they like understand it, but then like they understand it from like support service. And then if you modify that and change that into like an experience, you're going to be delivering like a dope brand experience. And I know we're like, this is a podcast about D2C, right? Like in a customer-centric journey. So like, it's very important that like shape-shifting support to experience it's just like important. It's 100%. The way it's got to fucking be.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally agree.
I kind of want to shift gears because I still am like really want to dive into this.
Sure.
What I'm interested to know is if knowing nothing, right, coming from a totally different industry and having to learn the tech side of things, how did you make those decisions? Like, how did you navigate like learning the systems, but then also selecting like new tech?
So when I started at Freshly, they were using Freshdesk for email, Olark for chat, Genesis for phone.
Good God.
Right? Okay. So I walk into that, and again, this is 12 people. So it's a small contact center, and I'm learning. They're training me, right? I'm going through my first 2 weeks of training just to learn everything.
Yeah.
I have this decade plus experience working in venues, hospitality. So like, I understand what I want to do here as a supervisor of this team, but I don't know the systems, the tech, the tools.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of like novice, dumb me going, this sucks.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to learn 3 systems.
Yeah.
And like, they don't interact with each other. So like, if I see this email here and it's a day old, I have to now think proactively to go check Genesis to see, did they call? Because like, maybe I don't want to respond to this. It may have already been resolved by somebody else. They may have called in because they haven't gotten a response in so long. So I was sort of the dummy going like, there's got to be a better option where like there's one system that has all these in one. And they were like, I don't know, if you want to do that, go research it. You go figure it out, because like we don't have the bandwidth. So if you want to go figure that out and implement it and do all that, like, go ahead. But I don't think you know what you're getting into. And that was my first time finding Zendesk at the time. And so I look into that and thought, okay, that's all in one. Makes sense to me. Let's do that. We'll do calls, chats, emails all under one roof. I looked, figured out a contract, and said, let's see about working together to implement this.
Yeah.
That was my first time tiptoeing into that water.
Yeah.
Once you do that, then you learn like apps and adding other things and like really looking at the agents and like their average handle time. How do we get them to be more efficient? We look at CSAT and go, how do we get that up? We start looking at retention and go, we should do that. It's a subscription company. How do we make sure that they're buying more? So like it all sort of came naturally, and I was literally just an idiot researching online to be like.
I don't think you were an idiot. You just
I didn't know.
Research.
I was novice. I was novice.
You were a novice. Yeah.
I learned, and I wound up.
I want to tell you this really funny
Sure.
moment. When I was younger, like younger in my career, I thought novice meant expert. So I remember being in an interview. So every time somebody says novice, I literally am like, not an expert.
Not expert. Opposite of. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
I said it in an interview. I was like, yeah, I'm not like a novice, but you know, I'm like not an expert, like, or something like that. I don't remember what I said, but I was like, and I just remember the person being like, what?
Yeah. Like, let me interpret this. What is she saying?
Don't worry. She was 22-year-old Jess.
Yeah. There you go. I love it. Yeah. So I didn't know, I didn't have the experience in this world, but I was learning it.
Yeah.
And so there was part of that where I was sort of like, you know, fake it till you make it, because you have to interact with product and marketing and engineering.
Yeah.
And they're assuming that you know these things, right? They live in this world. It's not their first startup. They've been around a little bit. And like, so they're like, what did you write a spec for this? I'm like, yeah, definitely did. I did. I wrote that. Yeah.
What?
And then I go back and I'm like, what is a spec?
Yeah.
What are they saying?
Yeah.
They started using terms like APIs. I was, what the hell API is? I was like, yeah, they got API documentation. Yes, of course they do. Yes, I'll get it for you. I have it in an hour.
You're like,
and then I go,
okay.
What is API documentation? I do SDK. What is that?
Yeah.
These are all terms I know nothing about.
Yeah.
But I was in these rooms trying to like play like I knew what I was doing, because I knew I wanted to implement this tool.
Yeah.
But I didn't know anything else. So I learned a lot, to the point that my VP of CX at Freshly, still one of my best friends today, Colin Crowley. I love him. Shout out to Colin if you're watching. He saw that like I had a passion for it and wanted to do it, but I didn't know it.
Yeah.
So he convinced Freshly to pay for me to go to General Assembly and get certified as a product manager. So I have a certificate as a PM now. And I wound up being sort of like a CX PM who could interact with product and engineering and like hold my own at those tables. And I think that is what set me to the next level, where like I could go run a CX org and know what I was talking about. And this is all around the same time AI was sort of coming out too. And we were playing with chatbots and all that. And so it sort of all aligned at the right moment for me, where sort of everybody was relearning at the same time. And I was able to slide in there and look like, yeah, I'm relearning too. Yeah, I need to learn the world. Chatbots are new to me too.
Yeah. Man, that's so interesting, because we actually have a really similar like kind of background, right? Yeah. So I was like telling you that story about, you know, I went from the travel industry, being a corporate travel agent, to like then leading a CX team. It wasn't called CX at the time. It was like I was doing travel operations. I had the travel support team, and then eventually took the product support team and then created a CX department. But the reason I would bring this up, though, is like the same thing. I remember going to my first startup and being like, what's an API? And like, but I would work very closely, because at the time the startup was only like 30 people, and like, this is like pre-pandemic. So like, we're like all in the office, we're chilling, we're like homies. I got my snacks, you know. Shout out to my travel bank team, because I'm literally talking about all of y'all. And I remember knowing nothing. Knowing nothing. But I originally reported to my old boss, Iris. She was like head of business operations. And it was really awesome, because, dude, I learned so much, like coming from like customer service jobs and like doing all these like random tasks to then learning like biz ops in a startup, right? And like the finances and understanding P&L and having to think through data is how I have such like a background in data now, right? Like in my mind, like I'm like, well, what's the cost analysis of that, of doing that, right? Of whatever it is that you're doing. And then I ended up switching over to Angelina. I'm saying everybody's names, because if you guys are watching this episode, you should shout outs, right?
Love it.
So I switched over to Angelina, who was head of product management, and I learned product at that point. But like, because I worked so closely in this office, I did like worked closely with engineers, and I like learned things, but I didn't know shit about shit, my dude. Like I remember like turning around my old CTO Reed and being like, what's that? And he would like, everybody was like so patient though to like teach, and like, but the point is like learning product, right? Learning, you know, these terms, these technical terms, whether you're in D2C or in your B2B, like it's so important, because even if you don't know what it is, spending the time to just like go and research and understand it is going to play a part into you deciding what CX tech that you want, right? 100%. And now, because like we have this background, we come from like these non-traditional techie backgrounds into like a techie type of world, right? Sure. Now we can go and like talk to these like tech companies who are like want to enable like the CX teams and like kind of know the lay of the land. Yeah. You know? Yeah. So like I just like, I'm grateful that you have that background. I'm grateful that I learned that background. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting, like coming from different pathways into the CX world, into the D2C CX world specifically. You know, when I was at Feastables, like I didn't have to have like a massive team because I came from like a technical mentality of like deflect as much as possible, answer the questions before they become questions.
For sure.
So then I was able to have like such a small team because I deflected so much out of them,
Yeah.
like out of the team. But that's coming from a technical background, right?
Right.
Which actually leads me to my next question.
Sure.
So you not knowing anything about CX really, and then having to manage BPOs,
Mhm.
how did you navigate that?
Sure. So that was definitely, I remember the first time the idea of a BPO was raised in a meeting, and I was like, that changes everything.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to change. What are we doing? Like, are we really doing this? We're going to go down that path? And the answer was yes. And so we're like, okay, so how do we do this in the most thoughtful way possible and make it, there was a couple of things I wanted to make sure. The current team that we had in place, the original 12, didn't want them to feel like they were being displaced at all. I wanted to keep them. And so we wound up discussing it as this sort of like mountain rising up out of water.
Yeah.
And so if you were at the beginning, it looked like this little tiny island just poking out of the water. And like now it's going to be this volcano coming up. You 12 are going to be at the top. And what was the whole island is now just going to be the tippy top of it. And we're going to continue to grow out below. But you guys will still remain, and it's good for you because you're going to be moving up, and you're going to be the people who are getting escalations and things like that. And as we described it to them, they sort of could picture that in their mind and be like, okay, this is a good thing. I'm not losing my job today. We just aren't going to have more of us here in New York. We're just going to have more people over there. And as we tiptoed into the BPO world, we were really keen on a couple things. We wanted to be able to start very small.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to spend a lot of time on picking who like our leader on the ground was going to be, and we wanted them to match what we would want here in New York as close as possible. So we originally started with like one team lead and a team of 5, I think, which wound up growing to hundreds.
Wow.
And we found there were many BPOs that wouldn't entertain us at that size. They were like, no. Yeah, right. So they don't want to talk to you if you're less than 20 or something bigger than that.
Big mistake. Like that Pretty Woman moment. Big mistake.
Oh, yeah. I know. I've had that at many dinners with will not name BPO.
Yeah.
But many of them looked at me as little fish and then came back. They're like, oh, we would have liked that account. That would have been nice.
Yeah.
Like,
I have a story after this.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we sort of kept that vibe throughout as we were growing. We interviewed everybody. We were never like, hey, just get us 5 more. Even as we were in the hundreds, we were like, we're meeting every candidate. We want to make sure that they fit our brand. We put them through a rigorous testing. And that same leader that we had over the original 4 or 5 at the beginning, we kept that guy throughout the entire time. He's still one of my best friends today. He flew to New York. Like, we took him out in the city. I love him. Shout out to Dom. And we tried to keep that vibe at other BPOs as we added them too. We're like, who's going to be our Dom?
Yeah.
Who's going to be the original 4 that we care a lot about? And then we'll grow from there. And then as I went on to Pair and Thesis, we wound up using the same BPOs, and those same BPOs I did the same thing with. I was like, I need to find my guy or girl, make sure that they're going to be like my, eyes, ears on the ground that I can truly trust.
Mm-hmm.
And then we try to teach them how we want it to be done. If and when we could go out to, say, the Philippines or the R, we would do that too and spend a week or 2 to train on the ground and make sure we got that right. I think investment early in a BPO relationship pays off way down the line.
Yeah, I think investment early and what that investment looks like
100%.
is like spending time with them, building the relationship. Also, having good documentation.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Have a fucking personality.
Yeah.
Like, literally have a personality with your BPO. Don't just be like, here's the keys to the castle. Yeah. See you later. You're on an island.
Never works.
Like, it'll never work.
No.
And I love that people will hire and I say people, but I think upper management.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
Will be like, we can solve this cheaper overseas. Yes, you can, but
thoughtfully.
But you have to make it work. You have to be thoughtful. You have to be mindful. You have to like spend the time doing the training, like building the relationship, because it's not just like an on switch. Yeah. Right. And I'll be honest with you, I don't like third partying my customer's experience. Yeah. I really don't. But I think it's all audience dependent. Like I've worked in scenarios where the travel bank, like we utilized a BPO, but they were like onshore though. And we were like super close with them, spent a lot of time with them. Like I did a lot of training. At the time I was living in San Francisco, I would come to Chicago to like work with them. Right. spent a lot of time with them. So it was like a very cohesive experience, right? That was a very great BPO experience.
Sure.
But then I've also worked at like another tech company with a BPO, and I won't name names on this one.
Sure.
Or the shady practices. Okay.
Yep.
Not of that BPO, of like the company. But
Sure.
what I will say is that, so I worked with this BPO, and like when I came in, they were like, we need to fix the CX program. And I'm like, okay, like I'm down, like let's go. Like what's the problem? And I get in there and I'm like, you need to fix the problem because 90% of your agents are all overseas. You haven't trained them on the culture of the company. You haven't trained them on what they need to do. And it's just like a hot mess express, like choo-choo coming in. Like, what do you think is going to happen?
Right.
But that's my point though, is like, there's two different scenarios, right? Like, so, you know, onshore, granted, it's not like, and the actually at Travel Bank, we had both onshore and then eventually offshore too.
Yep. Went
to the Philippines, built a like dope experience, right? So like really great experience. And then on this other company, it was like nobody invested in it. So then it was like the cleanup crew was coming in
100%.
to fix it, you know? Anyway, okay, going back, I want to go back to that Pretty Woman for a moment.
Yes.
So when I was starting out Feastables, I did need to hire outsourcing because like I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And I remember talking to several BPOs and they would be like, who's Feastables?
Yep.
What is Feastables? And I'd be like, dude, I don't even know what Feastables is half the time, but like, you know. But I remember people telling me no.
Really?
And then coming back and then being like, oh, we really shot ourselves in the foot on that one.
Yeah.
That's my Pretty Woman moment.
I love
I'm
it.
like, big mistake.
Yeah. Yep. I love that.
Like, you didn't want to give me the fucking time of day,
I know.
you know? And now look.
Yep.
But whatever on that. Okay.
It did help me out, the next brand, because when I started Pair Eyewear, we were, I don't know, I was number 14 when we started there. And so the CX team was also small and had been at a BPO. Yeah. And I remember getting on those calls and they were sort of dismissing this little brand. And I was like, I'm here now. I promise we're going to grow. And they're like, oh, this is going to be one of those? Okay, we care. And all of a sudden, like, you got the attention of the CEOs and they're like, okay, this little brand is going to grow too. And I've been able to repeat that a few times.
Man, I think that's like, what's so interesting, and I've had a couple of conversations about this recently, is like about like merchants to vendors and vendors to merchants. Yeah. And like just kind of like being a little disrespectful on either end. But like this industry is so small.
Yes.
Like, we all know each other.
I know.
People are going to probably be like, wait, Jess and Ben know each other? Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we all know each other. Like, and I know that's like more merchant to merchant, but like, but even the merchant to vendor flip of the relationship, it's like, I just see a lot of times, like, people just being really crappy to each other.
Totally.
And I'm just like, that's going to bite you in the
100%.
ass. Like, in 5 years, my dudes.
Yep.
That is not, you should not be treating those people that way.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even treating, it's not, I don't even think it's like the merchant to vendor, vendor to merchant piece of it. I also think it's just like human nature. Like, we don't need, like, nobody needs to be treating people like shit.
Totally agree. Yeah. And I've seen it long enough now that sometimes who is merchant and who is vendor switches, right? And like someone who used to be head of a brand is now at a BPO. Someone who's at a BPO is now leading CX to this other brand. And so like, you're right. It's a small community and we should never, just as a human, just don't burn bridges and like be kind to each other. And like, let's do what we're trying to do for the customers in our little selves here. Yeah. Because who knows where we're going to be next. And like, we're all, you know, interacting with each other again and again.
Oh, totally. I mean, dude, like Feastables, right? Like Feastables, going from Feastables, being on the brand side and then doing multiple different brands, like with like my agency, right? And then also being on the customer piece of this, right? I'm the whole reason Customer and Jess are all in the ether together is because I utilize Customer at Feastables, right? And I'm a stand for Customer because like, it's not just because like, oh, okay, I'm a stand for Customer because I work at Customer. I'm a stand for Customer because I've actually have used that product and I've used that product in multiple places. You know what I mean? So it's like, this is, you know, my opinion, but I'm a stand for the software. But the point is though, is like, you know, that's a good example of like, okay, bringing Customer over to like clients that I work with or like that word of mouth referral and like a good like merchant to vendor relationship, because like you eventually might flip.
Exactly.
You know?
Yep.
Now I'm with the vendor,
Yep.
right? Like, it's just like, you just always got to treat people with kindness and respect.
Totally.
No
agree.
matter what. You know, and I don't care if it's like customer support agent and like a chat bot that you're talking to.
Yeah.
Be nice.
100%. Preaching to the choir.
I know. Okay, I know we talked a lot about like Freshly and stuff, but I actually want to switch gears and get to like Thesis.
Yeah, sure.
Tell me about Thesis. Like,
Yeah.
I know you're no longer there, but
Yeah.
I am very interested in like that journey, how you went from like Freshly and like
Yeah.
these other places and Pair to then to Thesis. Like, how did you tell me about Thesis first of all, and like
Sure.
just tell me about that experience?
Yeah. So I think we talked about going from sports to Freshly and how I made that switch. Freshly is then, you know, a 5-year run, wearing every hat you could wear, getting certified as a PM, you know, being this sort of CX PM guy. We called it Associate Director of Infrastructural Efficiency, really getting into the weeds of like, what are the agents doing? How do we get more efficient? That set me up, you know, after Freshly got acquired by Nestle for $1 billion, big exciting day. A bunch of companies coming after us, all of us, to say like, hey, come do that here. Pair Eyewear seemed like the most interesting one at the time. It was super young. They were like pre-Series A. It looked like there was, you know, nothing but up for Pair Eyewear, and still nothing but up for Pair Eyewear. I love them. And so I was able to come in, sort of repeat the story that I had at Freshly, but instead of me being under somebody, now it would be my show and I get to run it. That was the most exciting thing for me. So I was Senior Director of CX there, only reporting into the CEO, and was able to scale a team again from, you know, less than 12 to 120 or so by the time I left.
Wow.
Was there through Series A, B, and C. Got to build the tech stack out, got to really build structure and see that I could run a show on my own, and that felt really good. Thesis is, I will make this story as short as I can, but it goes way, way, way back to like a VC roundtable about CX that I attended way back when I was at Freshly at the Empire State Building. I go there and, you know, we're all sitting around a table, we're answering questions on CX, and this guy comes in a little late. He had a beanie on and a beard. And so I thought I recognized him, but I wasn't sure. He looked sort of off, and he missed intro. So he sat in there after we were already done. And he winds up asking a lot of questions, saying that he's a new founder, just starting, doesn't know anything about CX. And me and my other friend, Brian Kale, who ran CX at Bank Novo, we were at the table together and we started answering a lot of the questions. And at the end of it, we sort of stepped up to each other and he was like, Barclays Center? I was like, yeah, Barclays Center. He had worked for the Nets, I had worked for the venue, and we had interacted almost every single Nets game. But back then he was like clean shaven in a suit, like doing all this. And now he was starting this company called Find My Formula, talking about nootropics and brain health and all this stuff. And he was literally at the table. He's like, come over, like come run CX. I don't know anything about CX. Me and my friend Dan, we're starting this company, and like, come do it now. And I was like, I think Freshly's good. I'm doing a lot of good things over here. Like, I'll help you. I'll assist you. If you want me to help you hire somebody for CX, we could do that. But I'm not ready to jump yet. So I worked with them, helped them hire somebody to be head of CX, wound up being like a mentor to her over years. I do the whole Freshly run, do the whole Pair run. And at the end of all that, they were about to raise Series A. They had rebranded to Thesis and hit me up again to say, like, what about a VP of CX role? Now we're in a position to do that. That was a logical next step in my career. I had known them for all this time. I'd gone back to Barclays Center with one of the co-founders, and I thought that was a beautiful spot to be. So I joined Thesis, and over, you know, about a year or so, helped bring their CX to the next level, build out a tech stack, switch them from one ticketing system to another, and got them in a good enough spot to where, you know, at the beginning of this year, there was like, do we have a need for a VP of CX? Like, you sort of fixed a problem that you came in to solve. And all while that was going on, I had been toying with this idea of consulting because it was always sort of there in the background. And I thought that'd be cool to work with multiple brands at once. And so as I was leaving Thesis, I had already been sort of tiptoeing into the world of consulting. I've been doing a couple accounts here and there with my friend Lior. And I thought the first text was to him. I was like, let's just do more of that. I'll just do that more and we'll see what it is. I knew nothing about it. I expected it to be a lighter load, I think. And I'm learning that that's definitely not the case. You just have many more bosses and you know, many more deadlines. And so now consulting for, you know, a dozen or so brands has really been an incredible learning experience for me, and so much more rewarding because like all the things I want to do where I want to provide great experiences, like I know you talk about dope experiences all the time. Now, instead of doing it for one, I get to do it for many all at one time. And that is rewarding to a place I never thought I would get to.
For sure. I think it is really interesting being able to like work across like multiple different brands at once,
sure.
because it's like now we're instilling like a new CX like philosophy.
Exactly.
You know? And I think that's really sick.
I love it.
Okay, I have one question.
Sure.
So like both of us were in like vice president of CX roles,
Yes.
right? And like, I don't feel like in the industry, there's a lot of like senior level CX roles, because I
Yep.
don't think that people take it as seriously
Totally
as
agree.
possible. Like, I think they just think of it as like support.
Yep.
I'll be honest with you. And I'd just love to hear in your opinion, like, do you think the world needs more like senior level CX roles,
Yeah.
right? First question.
Sure.
Second question.
Hard
in
yes,
that.
but yes, I'll go.
Yeah, hard yes,
Hard yes.
but-
yeah, continue.
I agree with you, but like, and this kind of gears up like where I was going with this, but like, what do you think the difference is between a CX manager, associate director, a VP,
Mhm.
or a CXO? Like
Sure.
we know what it is on paper,
Mhm.
but then I think the philosophy of a lot of senior leaders out there are like, no, we don't need that. Like you see more of like those senior level roles in tech, but
Mhm.
you don't see it in D2C.
Yep.
And like, I want to know in your opinion, why?
Mhm.
And what's that difference?
Sure. I think it will. There's such a big answer here. I'm thinking how I want to tackle it. So depending on the maturity of the brand, like sometimes there isn't even a C-suite. So like
Mhm.
talking about a CXO just makes no sense, right? Or there are no VPs named yet. So should a VP of CX be the first one? I don't know, right? There
Yeah.
may be a need for procurement or like who knows, whatever the thing. Marketing may be a big deal. So my one answer on why there may not be a VP or a CXO level may just be that the company is not at that
Mhm.
point yet. And they literally are just in the weeds saying, we need a manager, we need a director to come in here and literally lead the day-to-day of like triaging problems. But if you can step one step beyond that and you are D2C e-commerce, there is no bigger pile of data that exists to tell you what is wrong with your company and what is right with your company and where you should sort of steer the boat.
Mhm.
That exists in customer experience, right?
Mhm.
They're sitting on all of it. How do you not have a senior level person who knows this data intimately well and can help report that out, whether you want to call it voice of customer or whatever you want to call it? There needs to be a feedback loop there
Mhm.
at a senior level that can influence change to say, hey, we ran a marketing campaign. It may have performed in this way, but if I look into the customer experience data, I see that it caused more churn or more, unfavorable sentiment or whatever you want to say, and then pair that with dollar amounts
Mhm.
to then really paint a picture and look at it more holistically, not just like, whiny bitch who's like, oh my God, I have a problem with all these people complaining about it.
Mhm.
But like, yeah, we're looking at it in a way to say it's this percentage of the inbox that's caused this percentage of
Mhm.
churn or decrease in LTV, whatever. And therefore we want to make this change to the business, this change to the UI, this change to a marketing campaign, whatever it'll be. The only way that gets done is at a senior level being at that table.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think it's like a strategic thinker.
Yeah.
It's a strategic thinker that like I think in the role, it's a
Mhm.
strategic thinker, right? And I think it's the strategy and like also being so intimate with not only the data and like the customer's journey,
Mhm.
but also being so intimate in the business strategy too.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of times there's a lot of separation, like, oh, okay, that's CX.
Mhm.
We don't really need to like tell CX about what the jam
Right.
is over here,
Right.
right? But I'm like, well, if you're deciding to, I don't know, this is something that recently has happened. If you're deciding to internationally start shipping your product,
Mhm.
probably something you should, one, tell your support team
Yeah.
how to manage, but two, we should really be talking about those policies because internationally versus domestically
Yeah.
are two different experiences.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't mean in just a policy perspective. I literally mean in a localized experience.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
but the thing is, I think that's a strategic business decision maker,
Yep.
right? So whether you want to call it like a director level, you want to call it VP, you want to call it C level, whatever it is,
Yep.
I believe that like if your business is scaling to a point, like you do need these senior level roles because you don't need just the doers and the executors, you also need the strategists.
Yeah,
in
totally
there
agree.
that are completely out of the queue.
Yeah. There was one funny thing came to mind. That's why I was smiling as you were talking. It was an offsite I'll say it was Pair Eyewear. It's okay. And, we were all together, all senior leaders, and they put up on the slide how we successfully launched in Canada or something like that. And Emily, who is associate director under me, she's one to speak her mind and not hold back. And she was like, did we though? And everyone, CEOs were like, yeah, we did. Like we launched, we have money. Like, I don't know what you mean. It's like that wasn't successful at all. That was really difficult. Like, do you know the amount of tickets that came in? Do you know all the things that we weren't prepared for? Do you know, like, we didn't know how to handle returns? We didn't know how to handle refunds. It was different currency. Like, there were all these things that we were not prepared for that we just flipped on one day in Shopify and said, we ship to Canada now. And it sort of blew up the inbox. So, I mean, we did launch in this country. I don't know if we did that successfully.
Yeah.
Just because money came in, we were not prepared. And if you intend to go more international, let's learn from what we just did and let's get ahead of it. And it sort of like brought everybody down of like, oh, I thought we did this so well. But I was like, okay, but we can tell you more information on that. And let's not just
Bring
like take a victory lap. Yeah. And we could have been better prepared for it. So it was eye-opening to a lot of people. And it made them reset and think about like how quickly they were going to go international because, oh yeah, CX is a thing and we should talk to them before we go and do all these crazy things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. Okay, well, my friend, we're actually at the end of the road, but we haven't gotten to what you do today.
Oh, yeah.
So give a little plug
Sure.
to where you are now.
Totally.
Outside of all of these things.
So I'm in this position of CXO, which feels great right as I was going up the ladder at a company called Create CX. My friend Lior has been doing this for a long time. He and I have been together here in New York for a while, always running in the same CX circles. He was at Bonobos and Slice and Coterie. I think at one point he actually had interviewed for Freshly before I got there. So like we could have played in the same pool years and years ago. And we've always sort of toyed around with the idea of, couldn't we do consulting for more? And so, like I said, even while I was at Thesis and a little before, I would help him out from time to time on an account, an hour here, an hour there, nothing big, but just sort of tipping my toes into that water. And now doing it full time, it is more than I could have ever anticipated for sure. Definitely makes you flex the time management muscle, the organization muscle, because you're dealing with so many different things all at once and dealing with all the CEOs and all the VPs that are your bosses now. But genuinely loving it. I'm jumping into, customer more often than I ever would have before if I was a Zendesk customer. And I'm learning everybody's tech stack and how they think about CX. And I feel like, before this, I may have thought I was a CX thought leader and you would see me on LinkedIn or on podcasts. And now that I'm in it in this way, I had no perspective. Like now I have perspective. And even now I'm learning that like I can learn so much more. There's so many other brands I don't know yet. So I'm loving it. I'm gaining much more perspective on the whole world of CX with many brands all at once. And I'm really, really enjoying it. I don't know if I'll go back to VP of CX again. I think I like this.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. The world's like, who knows?
I know.
Well, tell the peeps where they can find you.
Sure. I'm big on LinkedIn. I play around in the Discord community. So I'm like any good CX leader. I'm on all the channels. Where you are, I am. I try to play there. So I'm on all the social medias, but probably biggest on LinkedIn.
Yeah. We'll put Ben's LinkedIn in the show notes, and we'll also put a Discord invite link.
Dang, we've made it to the end of the podcast and you're still here. So thank you so much for listening to Above the Fold podcast. For the best of this episode and every episode, be sure to follow us on Instagram and my YouTube channel. And for deeper dives on the secrets to brand success, don't forget to subscribe to my weekly newsletter, Sunday Postcards. All right, my dudes and gals, see you next week.